At 0437 local time, 20 nautical miles south of Sri Lanka, a Los Angeles-class attack submarine was doing what American submarines do better than anyone on Earth, hunting enemy ships 7 nautical miles ahead. The Iris Dina, one of Iran's few remaining surface combatants, was pinging active sonar, zigzagging at 15 knots, hunting for what exactly was trailing her. Soon, CENTCOM would give the sub's captain an order that no American submarine commander had received since World War II. The sub just had to get into position first. With her whole sonar active, the Dina was desperately hammering the ocean with pings. Her ASR 3D radar swept the full 360-degree, and every 3 to 5 minutes, the captain swung the ship on random course changes, turning the Americans' fire control solution into a math problem that reset itself before anyone could solve it. The tactic exploited a simple weakness in submarine targeting. Submarines actively hunting a ship just use their passive sonar that gives bearing-only direction, not distance. It's like using the compass on your phone instead of maps. You know which way to go, but you have no idea if the destination is 1 mile away or 10. The fire control technician stared at his waterfall display, watching the Dina's bearing line creep across the screen 1 degree at a time. That creep was everything. By measuring how that bearing shifted over minutes, feeding it into targeting algorithms called target motion analysis, or TMA, the technician could triangulate range, course, and speed. A green line on his display converging toward a firing solution like a blurry photo slowly coming into focus. Except the Iranian captain kept shaking the picture every time it almost got sharp. Then the Dana zigged. The green line scattered. Half the work evaporated. The technician started over. New bearing, new hypothesis, new convergence crawling toward a solution that the Iranian captain would blow apart with another random turn in 90 seconds. Imagine trying to measure the exact distance to a car by the sound of its engine while somebody keeps changing lanes. That was the fire control team's morning. The Iranian captain had spent 2 weeks at Milan 2026 multinational naval exercises with the Indian Navy, practicing exactly these anti-submarine procedures. The Americans had watched. Now, one of those submarines was trailing the Dina like a patient ghost, and the captain's training was the only card he had left to play. But that wasn't what worried the crew. What worried them was sitting on the Dina's aft flight deck. The SH-3 Sea King anti-submarine warfare helicopter carried a low-frequency dipping sonar purpose-built to do one thing: find submarines where hull sonar can't reach. Think of it this way. The Dina's hull sonar was shouting into the ocean from the surface and hoping for an echo. The dipping sonar drops a microphone directly into the submarine's hiding layer. The Sea King hovers, lowers a transducer on a cable straight through the thermal layer, and pings from the same acoustic environment the submarine is hiding in. That thermal shield, keeping the sub invisible, stops working the instant that transducer drops below it. It's the acoustic equivalent of hiding behind a curtain while someone walks around to your side of the room, and the Dana's helicopter crew knew how to use it. One competent helicopter crew could leapfrog across the ocean, sanitizing the search box the sub was sitting in faster than a surface ship could cover the same ground in a full day. 400 feet down, you can't see a thing topside. You listen. A helicopter spooling up has a sound signature. Turbine whine, rotor engagement, the sharp transient of liftoff. The sonar team strained to hear any of it through the ambient noise. Nothing so far. But the absence of sound through the thermocline guaranteed nothing. If the Sea King launched while the sub closed the range, the Americans had 2 options: shoot immediately before the helicopter establishes a search pattern, or go deep and lose the window entirely. There was no middle ground. For now, the thermocline was doing its job. A boundary where warm surface water meets cooler deep water, bending sound the way a prism bends light. The Dina's pings hit that boundary and refracted upward, curving away from the submarine, painting an empty ocean on the Iranian sonar screens. 400 feet down, the sub was a hole in the water. Except the thermocline isn't a wall, it's a lens. and lenses have quirks. The sonar chief watched one of those quirks threaten to expose him. Sound traveling through deep water bends downward, strikes density boundaries, and arcs back toward the surface at intervals. Convergence zones, places where a ping that should have faded long ago arrives clearly on a sonar screen. One lucky geometry from the Dana, one ping at the right angle, and the Iranian operator paints a contact he can't explain sitting exactly where the submarine is. Worse, the layer was thinning. Technicians had been dropping expendable bathythermographs to measure the water. 3 clocks were now running against them. The thermal layer was thinning by the hour. The Dina was steaming roughly parallel to the Sri Lankan coast at 15 knots. At current course and speed, she would cross the 12 nautical mile territorial limit in approximately 40 minutes. Once she did, the shot would be gone under international law. And on the aft flight deck, the Sea King sat fueled, armed, and 1 order away from turning the submarine's hiding place into an exposed arena. Any one of those clocks running out would end the mission. All 3 were ticking. So at Aero 441, with the layer thinning, the helicopter a coin flip from launching, and the fire control team wrestling a zigzagging target through an ocean full of noise, the sub needed something it couldn't get from depth: authorization. The execute signal couldn't reach operating depth. Extremely low frequency radio penetrates deep water, but carries almost no bandwidth. Enough to say, come up, not enough to send detailed orders. To get the order, they had to rise to periscope depth. That meant leaving the thermal layer that had been hiding them, entering water where the Dina's sonar worked best, and raising a communications mast into radar range. A thin metal tube barely above the surface, visible for seconds. One sweep at the wrong moment, and detection. But the crew had a plan. A South Korean LNG tanker, 200,000 tons of steel, was moving through the corridor nearby, throwing a massive radar return. The navigator had been tracking it, waiting for the alignment. If the sub surfaced along the exact line between the tanker and the Dina, the mast would sit in the tanker's radar shadow. To radar, it would look like clutter. At Aero 448, the geometry aligned. The submarine rose. The thermocline peeled away. Noise increased. 3 days of invisibility traded for seconds at the surface. The mast broke the water. Link established. Message received. Authorization confirmed. The sub slipped back beneath the layer. Now the geography tightened. The Dana continued zigzagging, edging closer to protected waters. Every minute mattered. One more constraint remained. The submarine was towing a long sensor array behind it, its most sensitive ear. But once the torpedo launched, maneuvering risked tangling or snapping it. At 0453, the firing solution locked. The torpedo tube flooded. A sharp sound. The weapon dropped and began its run. Wire guided, nearly silent, leaving no visible trace. The submarine stayed steady, unable to maneuver, guiding the weapon through a crowded shipping lane. At 5 miles, the Dina changed course. The operator corrected. At 4 miles, the ocean depth shifted. At 3 miles, another sonar ping swept past. At 2 miles, the torpedo slowed, activated its own sonar, and locked onto the target. Now it was visible. An alarm sounded aboard the Dina. Seconds remained. Countermeasures would take too long. Maneuvering would take too long. There was nowhere to go. The torpedo passed beneath the hull and detonated below the keel. A massive gas bubble lifted the ship upward. For a moment, the vessel hung unsupported. Then structure failed. The ship broke and sank beneath the surface. At 0508, a distress call was transmitted. Rescue arrived to find debris and survivors in the water. Below, the submarine slipped away undetected, returning to silence as if nothing had happened.